please.
Infirmities not of a newborn, but of a man well in his 80s on his way to the grave.
He's dying?
Of old age.
Oh, God in heaven. He looks just like my ex-husband.
Anybody doesn't want to go to war, now's the time to say so. Fellas!
It's a funny thing coming home.
Sweet Jesus!
You realize what's changed. Benjamin. Is you.
Is somebody looking for me?
Good night, Daisy.
Good night, Benjamin.
Hello and welcome to In Case You Missed It, the podcast where we talk about movies that you didn't see, even though you should have, or maybe movies that you haven't thought about in a while. I am Scott Schuldis, and I'm here with my co-host, Josh Reese.
Hello.
And hi, Josh. And today we are talking about The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And this is, I think Josh and I have probably mentioned a couple times that one of our favorite, if not our favorite director, is David Fincher. And this is a story simply about a man who ages backwards. This is certainly a unique movie. I was kind of surprised for something like this. The budget was $150 million.
Wow.
Now it's a lot of visual effects.
Yeah, a lot of that is to visual effects.
Which we might as well say now, the visual effects in this are stunning. And frankly,
yes,
they hold up.
They do hold up. There's some shots where you can feel it's a little dated with like the face replacement, but for 2008, it's pretty incredible.
And that's what I was thinking. This had to have been quite an undertaking in 2008 with the face replacement. And frankly, I know I've seen at some point the visual effects don't stop at the face replacement and the de-aging and the aging up.
Yeah.
It's also a lot of replacing backgrounds to be historically accurate and all this stuff. So it's a lot of visual effects work you might not notice. You are right, Josh. There was a few. I've noticed that there's close-ups early in Benjamin's life where with the mouth movements, they're a little rubbery, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I think about I was trying to think like who else has attempted something sort of on this scale. I think Rogue One.
Yeah. Rogue
One didn't do it any better, frankly.
No.
I'm not saying that looks bad. I know some people don't like it. I didn't mind it. But it's not flawless. But for 2008 on this scale, I think it looks great. It really does.
It does. And face replacement, I mean, I'm sure they're getting better at it, but it's still like one of the more difficult things to do in visual effects. And, even like at work, like we had a scene where there was like a stunt performer and we were trying to like replace the face with the actual actress. And I was like, I'll try a temp version of this just to like get it in the cut so we can see what it would look like. And I was just having the toughest time of even just with a face that's barely moving to put another face on top of it. It's just such a difficult thing. But the way they did it here is like, a different actor with like dots all over their face, capturing the movement, and then Brad Pitt recording these things later and they drop it on there. It's a lot of like, visual effects. If you're doing visual effects work that's in like the 2D space where things aren't really rotating, things aren't happening that way, they're a little easier. But once faces start like turning to the side and you have to like kind of get the depth correct, that's where things get really expensive and difficult to pull off. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is here.
Yeah. And actually I think, and I don't know, just because of motion capture, like you said, in Benjamin's earlier life, when he's a man in his 80s or his 70s, he's much shorter. But yeah, a lot of times it was always on set. Another actor with a hood on or dots on their face. And then you can easily find on like YouTube and stuff, there's shots of Brad Pitt. He's in a box with all these lights, and it's not even dots. They paint his face green. Yeah. Which I guess is maybe that works like a normal or a bump map in 3D. Something that can easily detect light and shadow and depth and that kind of thing. I have to think, because this isn't too far before Avatar, but I have to think in a post-Avatar world, they could probably do much more face replacement like that on set.
Yeah, definitely.
That process would probably be a little more streamlined. So yeah, the fact that they did it, yeah, a movie like this for $150 million, which is, we'll talk a little bit about, this movie took a long time to get made.
Yeah.
But it made $335 million worldwide. So I think it just broke even, which is a shame. Frankly, this is a beautiful movie.
It really is.
In every way, shape, and form. It feels like a fairy tale, which is just fun. It's a David Fincher fairy tale, so it's very, 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 very sad.
Yes.
But just really quickly, just because I think this is interesting, some of the things, and we could go, Josh and I were talking, we could probably spend 3 hours just talking about behind the scenes of this movie, how they made it and everything that it took to get it made. But it is based off of a short story by F. Scott Fitzgerald of Great Gatsby fame, called, is it still, now I forgot. Is it still called The Curious Case of Ben?
I think it is. Yeah, it's within that. It was in like a collection of short stories. But yeah, still called The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. And I think it came out in 1922. So just over 100 years ago, which is crazy, but it still reads very, very modern stuff. I mean, even though it's set starting in Benjamin being born in 1860, but it still feels like pretty fresh today. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a breeze to read. If anyone's curious, if you watch the movie, like it's like 25 pages, like give it a read. It's just kind of interesting as a comparison to the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you, like you said, Josh, it takes place in a different period. So, this movie the book starts in 1860, but the movie Benjamin is actually born in 1918, the last day of World War I.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think as early as the 1980s, people were trying to make a script out of this. And I know two screenwriters kind of worked on it, and they said, this is a cool idea, but there's not much of a story here. There's not a lot of conflict. And then sometime, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, a screenwriter named Robin Swickard, sorry, Robin, I said that wrong. She wrote a screenplay, which was kind of the first time people were seeing this as a screenplay and saying, this could be a movie. Now, glazing over a lot of detail about how this eventually developed into a movie. This floated around then for another like 15, almost 20 years. And I believe the screenplay she wrote, it took place in the same time period as the original short story, sort of post Civil War, or during the Civil War, post Civil War, and into the Jazz Age. But the first time David Fincher read this script, he said that he loved it. He loved the idea of this being a story, but he says you have to be an expert in jazz of the 1920s to appreciate it. So he just didn't think it would work. So anyway, fast forward quite a bit, and eventually, and I forget how the screenwriter Eric Roth took a stab at it, and he pretty much wrote it as we see it on screen. I actually learned in researching for this that originally it does take place in Baltimore, and it was pretty much last minute that they changed it to New Orleans.
Yeah, that's interesting because the movie kind of has this framing device of being Daisy, in the hospital dying, and her daughter is reading this story that Benjamin has written in the hospital in New Orleans, I think supposedly during kind of Hurricane Katrina. And so I'm wondering, like, where did that come about because of the location change? Was that still in that script? I'm curious about that.
I wonder, and I almost wonder, because I saw that this movie, they originally changed it to New Orleans for budget reasons. It was just going to be cheaper, better tax breaks for the film. Well, then Katrina hit, and I guess I don't know who it is, governor, state, whoever, somebody in the Louisiana government called them and said, like, whatever we can do to get you to still make this here, we'll do whatever it takes, because obviously after Katrina was devastating for New Orleans and the South. And so, and a film brings a lot of money to a local economy.
It does.
For anyone who doesn't know, and I'm not going to pretend to know all this, but a lot of times films will shoot in certain areas because they get tax breaks. And typically those tax breaks come with certain stipulations, like you'll hire a certain amount of local crew. So you're giving jobs to people. Also, if you're buying supplies, food, hotels, all these things that people need when you make a film, you're giving money to the local economy. So film is great for a local economy. So really quick, just jumping back to Eric Roth, just so people know, he has written a lot, but he wrote, if anyone's heard of any of these movies, the most recent Dune, Killers of the Flower Moon, A Star is Born. Anybody heard of any of these?
I think I might have heard a couple of those.
Munich, yeah, some of these, The Postman, Forrest Gump. So yeah, Eric Roth wrote this, and we're all
not bad.
We're all the better for it. Yeah, that guy, he'll make his way one day.
Yeah, I think he'll figure it out.
So
it's incredible.
It's interesting, and we'll kind of talk about this as we go on. But you mentioned, and the Katrina thing had to have come in late into the script. Yeah, I would assume, because they didn't. Katrina threw a kind of a wrench in their plans to film this. But I think, and we'll talk about this. They're very specific about when they cut back to the present day. Josh, like you said, that sort of a framing device. The whole thing is Daisy, played by Cate Blanchett, is on her deathbed, and her daughter is with her reading Benjamin's diary. But yeah, they keep often when they come back, it's like Katrina's closing in. Is it going to hit landfall at one point? Oh no, it might miss us, and then it's actually is going to hit. And we'll talk about that, because actually I was going to do this before we started, but Josh, maybe you and I will figure it out on our own. I think some of that's deliberate, the way they timed that out. Yeah, using Katrina as sort of thematically how it lines up with the movie. Yeah, so we'll see.
I think so.
So yeah, so this is, before we get into it, this movie's long.
It is very long.
I think it deserves it. It's it's covering a man's life, and I think the major themes of this are, what does it mean to be alive and living your life? And I heard David Fincher say, somebody asked him if it was a love story, and he says, no, it's a death story, because it is about living and kind of making use of the time you have before you die. And so yeah.
It's interesting because, I'm like, we were talking about it before, how David Fincher is maybe our favorite director, if not one of them, if not our favorite. And in the last episode, I was talking about the Coen brothers and Fincher. I'm always back and forth, but there's something about Fincher that I love, just like the precise way that he makes movies, and just the tone of his movies are very like psychological thrillers typically. And I think when I first saw this, I was 18 when I first saw this, and I think my initial thought was like, man, that ain't no David Fincher movie. And I kind of like wrote it off. I'm like, I liked it, but that ain't no Fincher movie. I was still a Fight Club bro at that time. Still am, but not as much. But I think I kind of wrote it off of like liking it, but I'm like, yeah, that's kind of like maybe just above Alien 3 of ranking in my Fincher movies.
Wow.
Right. Yeah. And I know. And it's always been,
we're 10 minutes in and you say something so mean to him.
I know. Jeez. But it's always been my wife's favorite David Fincher movie. And I'm like, really? And she hasn't seen them all, but even if she had, I think she'd still say the same thing. So we've always wanted to like rewatch it, and I'm glad that we did, because I have a whole new outlook on it now. I'm like, I totally get why it's her favorite Fincher movie. And I think it's a different thing for him, but I think it's so well done, and such a, his most like touching, most heartfelt movie, I think.
Yes. Just
about life. I think being a little older has definitely helped me appreciate this one a lot more. And I don't think I cried the last time I saw it when I was 18, but now I cried most of the movie.
It's funny you talk about getting older, because I think about that all the time. One of the things that I think this movie speaks to people, and why everyone should watch this movie, everyone who's alive should watch this movie, is that it speaks to so many pivotal moments in our life. And it's interesting how they almost there's a stronger focus on those things. You have a different perspective when you're talking about a character who is aging backwards, when you're talking about a character who is often looks like an old man, but has the innocence of a child. And so I think it is you as a result, it kind of throws into sharp relief these ideas of the first time you kiss somebody, the first time you fall in love, the first time you have a drink, the first time you're hungover, the first time you're with a woman, like all this kind of, or a man, specifically him, it was a woman. But all these moments, and it is interesting how you kind of step outside them and you really take them, you look at them from a different angle when you do have this character who's experiencing them in a similar but different way. And to say that, like, in 2008, I was in college, and my favorite line in this movie is when Benjamin comes back. He goes out to sea for about 9 years, and when he comes back, he says it's a funny thing coming home. It looks the same, smells the same, feels the same, and you realize the only thing that's changed is you. And in 2008, I was in college, and that's exactly what I went through. You know, it is that was the first time I experienced that. And again, we're older, possibly wiser now than, when we first watched it. But you look at it different. We've moved forward in our lives, and we kind of you look at it with a different lens. And so certainly a movie worth revisiting too. This is going to get really heavy. I can already tell you.
It is. Yeah, for sure. Oh yeah. But I didn't get any tissues. I need to go grab a box.
But yeah, Josh, what's some of the stuff you love about this movie?
Oh boy. It's really just, oh man. Now I'm trying to think of what to talk about first.
Is that too broad? I'm sorry.
That's a very broad. No, that's fine. I think I love how timeless it is, even though it's set, starting at World War I, the end of World War I, and kind of coming up to almost present day. It's really, and even reading the short story that's set even earlier, this story, like, it follows just different stages of life that feel timeless, of just, growing up and learning what life is about and being young and stupid for a while. And then kind of going out on your own and learning more about the world. I think that's so well done here, and it's such a big part of it. And then, like you said, coming home is a big part of it, because, like, we kind of end the story where he's back where he started, but he's lived this life and he's gone on these adventures and learned so much. And he's changed a lot, but, he kind of makes his way back to what he's known his whole life. I think it's just a really timeless thing overall, is what I love so much about it.
Yeah. And I like I think there's a lot of, thematically, there's a lot of stuff that talks about life moves in a circle. Literally the first thing is, we have this big round clock that's moving backwards, made by a guy, who lost his son in World War I. And he says, I'm hoping if this moves backwards, all those boys we lost in World War I will come back. But like you said, I like that Ben starts his childhood home. He starts in the same place he ends up. And I love that the place he starts is a place where people go to die.
Yeah.
And yeah, just, there's a lot of stuff in this that talks about life moving in a circle, a lot of things repeating themselves. But also, I like you said, you talk about his experiences. I think a lot of what this movie covers is, it talks, I love the movie kind of pulls between, life it's the sum of our experiences, and some of those are fate, and some of those are choices we make. And I like how we watch Benjamin grow, through the people he meets. And I love the character of, Oti, O-T-I. Who kind of is the first one to teach him that life is meant to be lived. And I think that's, as a result, that's where he, kind of where that started with him.
Yeah. I like that. I really like how he kind of runs into all these people and he sees, like, them living their lives kind of in, like, they're older than him, even though he looks older than them. And they have all these things. They're like, you know what? I really wanted to do this when I was younger. I really wanted to I wanted to be an artist, talking about like Captain Mike or, you know, all these people that he meets that had other dreams that didn't work out for them. I love that he's able to like kind of learn this as he's growing. And then it's interesting to see him get younger and be able to kind of figure out what he wants in life and try different things. And, you know, they talk about, I think in one of the behind the scenes things, Kathy Kennedy says that like the story is, at least in the book, the short story, it's like how youth is wasted on the young. Yeah. Yes. How it's like, you know, all the like you're young and dumb and you don't have any experience, you don't know anything, but then you get old, you have all this knowledge, you like know what you want in life, but you can't do it because your body's just not there or you're mentally not there. I think it's really cool to see like somebody who's experienced so much being able to do so many different things that maybe an older person wishes they could still do. I think it's kind of a pretty powerful thing to think of things that way. That's
certainly shown in Daisy. Even though mentally Benjamin is around the same age as her. I think with her, you have this life moving forward or aging forward, and she's aging as he ages backwards. Well, you mentioned Captain Mike. And I love a theme that I think runs through this movie. And I don't remember his quote exactly, but when he talks about life, something about life coming at you and that you can be mad at how it played out, but eventually you have to surrender to it. And there is just countless scenes in this movie of that. And that's kind of what I mentioned earlier about life is about the choices we make, but it's whether it's, and Daisy mentions Kismet at one point, that there's so much fate. There's actually, let's jump ahead to this wonderful sequence where, so Daisy is, I don't know if we need to run over this really quick, but so, when Benjamin is, he's like 7 or 8, maybe, he meets a 5-year-old girl named Daisy and he falls in love with her immediately. And this movie really does jump back and forth about their lives lived separately and their lives lived together. But she ends up being a professional dancer in New York, and she travels all over the world dancing. But there's a sequence where Benjamin is talking about fate and how if one little thing was different. And so what ultimately happens is Daisy gets hit by a car and it shatters her leg in 5 places and her dance career is over. And describing this isn't going to do it justice. But so Josh, do you want to take a whack at that?
Oh boy. I can't even remember all the details.
I just threw you in front of a car to get your leg shattered.
Oh man. It's just it's an interesting thing of, I can't even remember all the details, but it's, oh boy.
And we don't need to recite the whole thing because it's not going to do it any justice.
No, it's, it's kind of the thought of like, there's a collision course of like events in your life.
He calls it a collision course.
Yeah,
yes. Good
good or bad. And one small thing can either make that not happen or happen, whether it's somebody had to stop because somebody else crossed the street. The taxi is now like, that hits her is now like a couple seconds later, or
the phone rang, a shoelace broke, someone didn't set their alarm, like all these little. It's a butterfly effect.
It's a butterfly effect that you'd normally see like in a time travel movie where if one thing is changed, it totally changes the future. And I think it's, and it's just this one little thing. And, it kind of goes back to, you have to like, you can be mad at life, you can hate it and all that, but eventually you just have to kind of surrender to fate and what's going to happen. He talks about that with Captain Mike when they were sitting on the dock and he's dying, and then his father as well.
And I think this was the first time I realized, because sometime around the time he's talking to Captain Mike, and I think it's right after, or maybe not, but when we first hear that line about you have to, no matter, you can get mad about it or not, but it's life, you have to surrender to it. They cut back to the present day. And that might be the first time we really see like Hurricane Katrina's coming.
Yeah.
And I don't know, is Katrina, is that life? We have to surrender. We can get mad that this hurricane's coming, but it's not going to do any good. Like it's still coming. So I think that's the first one. And like you mentioned, his Benjamin's dad, he talks about after Captain Mike dies and he learns that line, he meets his dad, and his dad tells him about like his the summer home from when he was a kid. And his summer home when he's a kid, and that he used to wake up early in the morning and go out to the dock and watch the sunrise and watch the day begin, he said. And so eventually his father's dying, and he carries his father to the dock so he can watch at this summer home to watch the sunrise again. And Benjamin repeats that line. He says, I can be mad about it, but I still have to surrender to it. And I think that's because his father abandoned him. His mom died in childbirth, and his father abandoned him immediately, 3 seconds after meeting him.
Yeah.
And so I think he decides to forgive his dad in that moment. And I think that's certainly a lesson a lot of people learn, is people, certainly family members that did wrong by you, is there any reason to walk around hating them?
Mm-hmm. And I think it's sorry, I feel like now I'm jumping back to like Daisy's injury, of her career ending injury. I think there's a really great scene where she's like in the pool and Benjamin comes in, and she's just so angry that has to kind of give up her dancing career, and like that it's hindered her. And he has this great conversation with her where it's like, well, you picked something that you could only do for so long because of the physical requirements of it. So one way or another, you were still going to end up in this same spot. We were still going to be here. You weren't going to be able to dance at this point anyway. So it kind of talks later to when he leaves, when he's talking about his daughter that he has to leave behind. And he's like, you're never too old to start something. You're never too old or too young, in my case, to start something. There's always time to try something new or to do something that you wanted to do. I think that's such a really cool message, just about like trying so many different things in life. And I think that he's been able to try so many things in life because of all the adventure and knowledge that he's had. And maybe he has more of a chance to do more things in his life than others because of his physical abilities later in life. But I think it's just like a really cool, positive message to kind of twist this idea of like, oh, I had this injury and now I can't do this thing anymore. I'm getting older and my body's giving out. But he has such a positive attitude on that I think is really cool.
And he takes her, I think it's the very next scene, he takes her to that dock that his dad died on. And she says, you'll never see me. I'll never succumb to self-pity again. And that again, and it's as the sun rises, which might be a little heavy-handed, but I think it really is that rebirth sort of idea that I think comes up a lot in this. And then he says something about she knew then that, or she made peace with it getting older. But again, it comes back to that you can be mad about it, but you still have to surrender to it. And so it is about he made peace with his dad on that dock. She made peace with getting older on that dock. So I think that's really, no, you're right. That's a wonderful moment with her and sort of this. And the thing is I think coupled with that is this resentment because she is getting older and he's getting younger. And I think that bothers her. Yeah.
I think they've never it's interesting seeing their relationship because they never quite match up in their stages of life until they're like just at the right age. That's just that cross point of they're basically physically the same age. Because before it's like, he's kind of lived his life already. He's kind of lived his adventurous life and is ready to pursue her. And she's, 23 in New York City and going out with guys, doing her dancing and all this stuff. And they're just never quite in the right moment together, even though they've loved each other basically their whole lives. I think it's interesting to see that shift as he now is younger and she's getting older.
And I believe the characters themselves were born 4 or 5 years apart. So as far as time on Earth, he's a touch older than her in that regard, because mentally he does seem to largely be maturing like a normal person.
Yeah.
And so is she, but yeah, him being just a little older, lived a little more life. And I'm glad you like you said when she first come back and they get together and she's in her 20s and she's been to New York and she's been dancing and staying out all night and sleeping with these other dancers, and I like that when she comes back, she just wants to prove to him how grown up she is. And that she's old enough to smoke if she wants. And they make a point to have her, she's talking endlessly about herself.
Yeah.
And I love that, because we were all like that in our 20s. And he eventually, so she tries to seduce him and he's like, no, this isn't right. You're leaving. And I think he's probably looking for something a little more substantial. Yeah. And she's not at that time. So he turns her down. But then after his father dies, he goes back to New York to do that. And she kind of blows him off. Because they say in the movie that he just kind of just stopped by. Like, it's not really fair for her to drop everything, but I think they do try to use this idea of her not willing to drop things for him. And that, they go back to the present day and she says, he came to tell me his dad died. And her daughter, Daisy's daughter, Caroline, says, you had no way of knowing, but she goes, I was 23. I didn't care. Yeah. And I love that line. Because at 23, you don't care.
No.
And that's not a bad thing. That's what your 20s are for.
Right.
Josh, if you ever age out of your 20s, you'll understand. But your 20s are they're about finding yourself. They're about, like, we put all this emphasis on like high school kids to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their life in high school. And your 20s are for finding that out. And so she acknowledges it because she's older, but everyone does that. Everyone's a selfish, opinionated jerk in their 20s, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So
you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you do. And you do that by experience. And there's nothing wrong with her. She did that by dancing and traveling. She also did it by smoking and fucking. Like, that's right. That's okay. She learned what that was.
Yeah.
So, yeah, great stuff. And actually, as long as we're talking about her in her 20s like that, and I don't think we've said this specifically yet, the cinematography, this film is beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
It's funny because David Fincher is what makes him perfect for this film is he's a cynical person. He's a very cynical person. This has a very melancholy tone to it. And as we've said before, it's a sad movie, but I got news for you, David. You fucked up making this completely depressing because it looks gorgeous.
It does.
And as you mentioned, there's a message at the end about living your life and that it's never too late to start living that gives it a very a satisfying ending. So sorry, Dave. No, but anyway, there's a moment in that sequence when Daisy's back and she's in this red dress and she's dancing on a gazebo, and it's stunning. It is. They put smoke behind her, or mist, and they lit the smoke. And there's a wide shot of the gazebo, and so the lit smoke just like silhouettes her as she's dancing. And you know what I love about that? Benjamin's watching her. And he's thinking what every man's thinking, but I love the way that's done. And she's dancing and there's no dialogue and there's a little bit of music. We all feel what he's feeling.
Yeah.
At that moment you're falling in love with this woman as she dances and in this beautiful setting.
Yeah.
Also, just because I have a note on here really quick, like I said, we're going to figure this out what Katrina means together. But right after that, where he rejects her, they cut back to the present day. And then when they're in the hospital with Daisy and Caroline, they say, "Oh, we got to report that the hurricane's going to miss us."
That's good. That's because I was wondering if this hurricane framing device was, if there was a point to it. But I think you're right. I think there is like a lot of time into it of what's happening in the story and what we're seeing there.
And David Fincher's too specific to keep putting in all these news updates about a hurricane unless he had a reason. Yeah,
for sure. Talking about the cinematography for this movie got a lot of Oscar nominations. And it won 3. I think it won best art direction, sound, makeup. Yeah. And visual effects, visual effects, and art direction. Rightfully so. It was nominated for cinematography. Cinematographer Claudio Miranda, who I've seen his name other places, but it was up against The Dark Knight, Wally Pfister, The Reader, Changeling, and Slumdog Millionaire, which won. That was the year that Slumdog kind of swept a lot of those.
I'll give it to Slumdog.
things.
Slumdog.
Yeah, Slumdog's great. But yeah, there's something about, David Fincher reminds me a lot in ways with Denis Villeneuve and the way that he works with cinematography and visual effects to put them together. There's so many. I think David Fincher is kind of a master at like making visual effects look like they're not there.
Yes,
he doesn't use anything that's like in any crazy. I mean, his stories never have anything that needs crazy visual effects, but he implements them so well that you don't even realize that it's happening. I think he's just really good at that. So I just wanted to make note of that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's one of the reasons this movie had trouble getting produced, was because how do you do this? How do you do a character that's aging backwards? And really, even if they were aging forwards, you have someone who, how do you do this where we're seeing every stage of their life? And the first thing was, it's not a movie star movie, because it sounds like we'd have to cast 6 people to play this character.
Yeah.
So it's probably not going to attract a lot of talent, big talent that way. But also, that's expensive now. We got to cast 6 people for one character, and there's a lot of characters in this movie.
Yeah.
So that was part of it. And then so they decided the visual effects. The visual effects were expensive. In fact, jumping ahead, Josh, I don't know if you saw this. I saw in that once Benjamin reaches the physical age of about 14, that is the first time it's not played by Brad Pitt. And
oh wow.
And
yeah.
I apparently, instead of de-aging him, which frankly I think would not have looked good, the old stuff worked. I don't think that would have, but apparently they did that because the visual effects budget ran out.
Yeah.
Now Fincher said that worked to cast someone else with him as a young kid. Looking like a young kid, because he's not even the same character anymore, because at that point he's actually got dementia. And if you weren't crying by that point.
Oh my gosh. That was terrible. Oh, that was difficult.
You have here's the thing. You have dementia and you have acne.
Yeah.
Fuck. God damn it.
Terrible combo. It's really interesting to think about, that Brad Pitt wasn't physically playing that actor up until that point, because it really seems like it limits his performance ability. He's not the one he's controlling the face. That's it. He's not even controlling necessarily which way the head is looking. He's literally just controlling the facial expressions, but he totally pulls it off. I think it's really powerful stuff that he's not even able to. I imagine he was on set while this was happening I don't know if he was giving direction. Probably not. David Fincher is so specific. He probably had exactly what he wanted in mind. But yeah, it's interesting to think of how limited Brad Pitt was in this early part of the film in what he was able to bring to it, but he pulls it off so well.
But I think one of the credits to the visual effects, even though they aren't seamless, they aren't flawless, there is a charm to Brad Pitt that we all have come to know and love. That comes through in the early stages of the movie, where he's an old man and he has to portray this innocence about him, and that comes through just fine. And I think that's why it doesn't bother me, because the performance, even if the visuals, the rendering isn't flawless, the performance is still there. Yeah,
definitely. One interesting thing I saw was that Cate Blanchett actually did the voice of Daisy at every stage of life. So even Elle Fanning, when she's playing it, which that's Cate Blanchett, which I didn't think about, but then listening to it again, I'm like, oh, that is her voice. I think that's really well done.
Now, did you not notice? Do you remember if you noticed the first time watching this that something was different about Elle Fanning's voice and whoever the actress was that plays her a little older? Did you notice that? Do you remember if you noticed that? Because I felt like when I first watched this, I'm like, something's off here.
I don't know if I noticed it the first time I saw it. I thought maybe it was just like some kind of accent they were putting on. But now knowing that it was Cate Blanchett, I'm like, oh, that makes total sense.
What was weird was when I watched it, maybe it's because I was prepared for it, because I thought it was maybe it was just jarring. When I watched it this time, it's not bad.
Yeah.
It works just fine. But yeah, actually, speaking of Cate, because all the visual effects talk is about Brad Pitt aging him and de-aging him. Cate, when Daisy's like in her 20s, late teens, early 20s, and she's dancing, and there's scenes with her dancing, do we know, was that face replacement?
I think some of it was, at least it seemed like it to me. Some of the ones where she's, there was one shot in the dance studio where she kind of looks kind of towards the camera, and there was something that felt a little off to me, that felt like it wasn't quite there, that I kind of felt on some of the Benjamin face replacements. There's like too much of a sharpness to it or something with the eyes that felt a little uncanny valley-ish. But yeah, I think they did do a little bit of that.
I think and I have to think that came out of necessity, because I'm sure Cate Blanchett could dance very well, but they had like, professional ballerina level dancer. I'm sure they replaced it. And just the physicality that takes, I think they probably did. But yeah, you're right. There is one, maybe two shots where it looks like her face is floating on the head a little.
Yeah.
It's hard to notice. And you and I are looking for that.
Yes.
Because we don't want to find it. That's why.
Yeah.
But yeah, except for one or two shots, it looks fantastic. That's why, I've watched this twice in the last 24 hours. And it looks fantastic.
It does. And I think it's David Fincher did The Social Network 2 years after this. And a big part of that movie was face replacement on the Armie Hammer double to make the Winklevoss twins. That may be the best face replacement that I've ever seen, because that feels totally flawless to me.
To the point that people thought Armie Hammer was a twin. They were the Hammer brother. Yeah.
So it's like almost like this was a trial run, and then that's when, and it's not as intense of a process on The Social Network, but it feels like he kind of perfected it at that point, and I don't think it's been done that well since. Yeah,
you're right. That had to have been a cakewalk on The Social Network.
Yeah.
Which, God willing, one day we'll talk about that movie.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that had to have been a cakewalk with the Winklevoss. The Winklevi?
Winklevii.
The Winklevi. So, yeah, just incredible. But so we kind of talked about, if this movie's saying that kind of your life is the sum of its parts, it's the experiences you have, it's the people you may meet, it's it's what fate throws your way. I kind of want to draw attention to some of the characters he meets, because I think they all teach him lessons. We mentioned Odie taught him to live it, but I think one of the first he meets, and we talked about Captain Mike, played by Jared Harris. Really quick, this has to be Jared Harris's like first big performance, right?
It seems like it. He was I always remember him in I think it's Mr. Deeds. I can't remember exactly. I can remember, his voice is so distinct that I can remember him in that movie. I can't even remember exactly what he does.
I don't even remember him in that.
But yeah, I think this is definitely seems like his first like big thing of a serious movie.
Yeah, and he's so wonderful in this and everything, and he's such a fantastic actor. He stars in a show called Chernobyl that Josh will never shut up about.
I can't stop talking about it ever since I saw it.
Why did I just do an inside? Why did I just do an inside joke on our podcast? No, I watched Chernobyl like I don't even know when it came out, 2 or 3 years ago, and I watched it. And I fell in love with it.
Much longer ago than I think.
However long ago it came out, I watched it a week later and then told Josh for how many years it's been, 4, 5, 12, to watch this freaking show, and he just wouldn't.
Yeah.
Now he watched it.
I didn't have time for that.
Yeah, and
I didn't think I had time for it.
He finally watched it and thinks it's just okay. So anyway, so that was time well spent. Speaking of not pissing away your life,
it's fantastic. You should watch it wonderful. In case you missed it.
Hard recommendation for Chernobyl, because it's wonderful.
Yeah,
but anyway,
maybe we'll talk about that sometime.
Maybe I'll never get you to watch it again. So, but one of the, I think after Captain Mike, who is sadly killed in World War II, but he or no, this isn't after Captain Mike. This would be before. While he's working for Captain Mike, he's in Russia, and he meets a woman named Elizabeth Abbott, played by Tilda Swinton, who is this sort of I can't quite tell how old she is in this, but she's married to a guy who I forget what his cover is, but he's a spy. But she's staying in this hotel with her husband, and she's a woman who she's kind of trapped in the life she has, and she seems. I love they kind of put that she's sort of afraid to kind of live a life. She talks early on when you meet her that she tried to swim the English Channel in her 20s, I think. And she, about 2 miles out, she gave up, I think because of the weather, her body gave out or something. And she said that people asked her if she would ever try again. And they said, of course. Yeah. And, but she never did. And so I think she's a great character that's kind of trapped in this life and kind of gave up on trying to take chances. And I like that when she meets Benjamin for the first time, she's obviously attracted to him, but she won't look at him. She won't give herself permission to look at him. I actually like when they first kind of have their first rendezvous, which does evolve into a full-blown affair. Mm-hmm. I like that when he comes down the stairs to the lobby of the hotel, she's smoking a cigarette and he makes his presence known. She immediately puts it out like she's doing something wrong. Like this is a woman who's scared to death to kind of take a chance to do something out of the ordinary. And she, you know, the thing where she gave up on her dream of swimming in the English Channel, but he falls in love with her. She's his first love. She's also his first kiss. And I love kind of, she has a line, they're having caviar and vodka at one point, and she tells him to savor it. Don't eat it all at once. Then there'll be nothing left to enjoy. And I think she's talking about the affair. But I think she's talking about living your life, taking chances, savor these chances. Because if you do it too fast, it's all over. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny that, he sends Daisy postcards everywhere he goes. Mm-hmm. And then he starts telling her that, oh, I met somebody. And you can see like in her eyes, just like the sadness that she kind of feels that like, oh, well, maybe he's not thinking about me as much as I thought. Which is an interesting thing of like, when they finally do meet up at that point, she's like still living her life and is, maybe not as interested, and she's still like, young and dumb at that point. Mm-hmm. So it totally makes sense.
And I think she talks about when Daisy and Benjamin finally get together, she says something about like, I'm glad we didn't get together at a different time until right now. And that they weren't the right people at that moment. And I think as far as like relationships go, I think that's true. You have to be the person you're supposed to be when you meet somebody and who you are. And so I like that. And that idea of he had to fall in love with somebody else, as part of it. He did need to fall in love with somebody else. She needed to, to have her time in New York and all that for them to be together. And so, yeah. And you're right. And of course, screenwriting 101, if you're going to write a love story, you need to figure out how to keep them apart.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so time is what keeps these two apart, which I like, and time and circumstance and all that.
Yeah, definitely. I want to bring up I think we got Mahershala Ali in his first big role. Definitely. I think I looked up and he was in one movie before this, I think, which I had never heard of. But man, he's good he's great. And he, speaking of this movie about aging and stuff, he looks the same as he does today.
Yes, exactly.
It's pretty insane.
That's true. He looks exactly in this movie like he does now.
He has not aged in the last 16 years at all. But he's great.
He is. And I like, and we didn't mention this. So he's abandoned by his father. Benjamin is when he's born, and he's found by Queenie, who is played by Taraji P. Henson.
Yep.
Is that her middle initial? Is it P?
It is.
And she's fantastic in this.
She's good.
And such a big part of this film is the relationship with her. And first of all, everyone should have a mother like Queenie. this kind of no nonsense, sassy lady who is always in your corner.
Yeah.
I love that when Thomas Button, Benjamin's son, father comes back, and he tells Benjamin he's going to leave his entire fortune to Benjamin, and she's throwing a fit. He only left us $18 that night. He left you on the stoop. There's that, and there's also when because after Daisy breaks her leg, she rejects Benjamin again, but then she comes back, and I love that Benjamin and Daisy are having this sweet moment in the dining room, and she's just like fluttering around them, just like something like, you could have called or or told us. I didn't think you were the selfish person, but I usually have a good and you know what? She's just being a mom, and I love it. I love it. Queenie, Taraji P. Henson, she's phenomenal in this, and the one thing, and I it's interesting, and is this a David Fincher thing? Is this an Eric Roth thing? There was such emphasis put on Queenie's Benjamin's mother, but not Tizzy being his dad.
Right.
I mean, he takes on that role. They obviously have a good relationship, but he comes back from being out at sea, and where's Tizzy? Oh, he died last spring. Shoot. Yeah.
I think this movie has a lot of those moments where it's just, death can really happen at any time, and you might not be around for it. I think that's like a big part of this too, because David Fincher talked about, a big like thing that kind of pushed him to this was like his dad's death and how sudden it was, and how like he had cancer, but they thought he had more time, and then they're like, he's in the hospital, and they're like, all right, he's got 5 minutes left, and it's just like, wait, what? Like, what do you do in that time? Like how do you end that relationship that that they're going to pass? And I think that's like a big thing in this movie. There's so many moments where it's just like, oh, this person passed away, like that. It's like you feel like you're going to have so much more time with people, and you never know when the last time you'll see somebody is.
Or you don't. Mr. Dawes.
Right. Yes.
Mr. Dawes he's in, I don't know, half a dozen scenes, but he always tells Benjamin, did you know I was struck by lightning 7 times? And he was always struck in the most mundane way. Once I was just sitting in my truck, and they show it. It's like it's a 2-second clip of a grown man getting struck by lightning. First of all, one thing I love about those shots is at least it looks like, and this is such a pointless fact to know, but back early days of film, like 100 years ago, if they wanted to do lightning, they'd film the shot, and then they'd go back in and actually like etch a lightning bolt, animate it on the film. It looks like that's how they did this in this movie.
It does.
It's probably digital. You spent $150 million. You might as well do it that way. But it looks like that. But anyway, that whole arc, and there are so many little story arcs about lives being lived in this, that he gives Benjamin this whole speech, and I can't remember specifically where it is in the movie. But he talks about like, what's he got? He's blind in one eye, and he's deaf, and his memory's not what it used to be. But he's told him these stories about all the times he's been struck by lightning. But he says, God keeps reminding me that I'm lucky to be alive. And again, it plays back to that theme of just, like you said, people can go any moment, and that yourself included. Right. And so I love just that cute, and it's funny. It's like a little running gag through the whole movie of this guy, Mr. Dawes, but just, the idea that it's precious and it could be taken away from you at any moment. Literally. I mean, there's things that have happened in our life that people are scared to death, and they, maybe they don't take chances. They don't leave the house for whatever reason. You literally could be struck by lightning sitting in your car.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just walking my dog. Very funny. It's interesting. You mentioned David Fincher, and he talked about, I think what really, like, the timing. We talked about the script traveled for a while, and as far as just like Daisy and Benjamin's relationship, this script traveled and changed, and it went to Fincher a couple times before he finally said it's time for me to do this. And the fact that it wasn't until after his father died, and I don't want to summarize, but there is stuff on YouTube about the behind the scenes of this. There's a 3-part thing I saw, but there's a long stretch of interview with David talking about that. And it's wonderful. And if you're interested in film, if you're interested in filmmakers, watch any Interview with David Fincher.
Yeah.
He's such a cynic.
Yeah.
And he laughs about it. He likes making jokes about dying and all this. I think this movie is it emphasizes his personality so much. But I think, like you said, there's parts where he's talking about his dad dying in the moment when you're there with somebody when they're leaving the earth. He's not an emotional guy, but he pauses a lot.
Yeah, he does.
I think this movie resonated so much with him, and I think that's why it would resonate with anyone who's alive. I think, watching some of the behind the scenes stuff of this movie, like I've seen a lot of behind the scenes stuff with David Fincher. Seeing him on set for this movie seemed like the happiest maybe that I've ever seen him. And maybe that's just that this is like not the dark psychological thriller type thing that he typically gravitates to. But it was interesting to see him a little more human than you typically do. He's a guy who is known for doing tons of takes on every setup, just kind of like wearing out actors to where they're just like comfortable in the scene. And that's typically, it's like, he kind of wants to beat the performance out of you to where you're just like kind of naturally in it. And he seems so like not robotic about it, but like, all right, let's do it again. Let's do it again. It never like seems to be upbeat or happy, but there's some things on here where I'm like, oh, he looks like he's having a good time. He looks like he's having fun, which was kind of nice to see on his end, because you don't see that a lot. He has a reputation about being, I think, a little scary. But I think it's one of those things where he's a trial by fire director. If you work with him, if you give him what he wants, but I don't think he's expecting you to guess. I think if you work with him, you do your job well, you work very hard. I think he respects that and he enjoys it. I mean, this is his third movie with Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
So they're getting along, but yeah, he's known for being very specific.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, many takes. And I've heard him. It's funny. You have directors that think if you do more than 2 takes, it's not fresh. But David says if you have a scene where you have to walk in and sit in a chair, if I make you do that 50 times, 80 times, suddenly that feels like it's your chair.
Exactly.
So yeah, like you said, it's comfortable, and you beat the performance out of him.
Yeah. He has another really good quote that I'll probably say it incorrectly, but talking about like editing, he's like, there's maybe 2 ways to cut a scene, and one of them is wrong, is I think one of his quotes. So that tells you kind of just how specific he can get with what he wants. And it's such a precision with the way that he puts things together. He has a very dark sense of humor. There is a scene where Daisy and Benjamin, or more specifically Brad Pitt and Cate Blanchett, are sitting on a trolley. And in the movie, this is when they're like about the same age. And we're talking, he's watching a love story between 2 of the most beautiful people on the planet. And he says, I'm sitting there watching this and thinking, he goes, at the end of this, when he looks up at her wrinkled old face and then he dies, this will feel a lot better. Oh my gosh.
And just the fact that, yes, these 2 beautiful people will eventually die just makes him feel better. And you know what, I feel that because while I love Brad Pitt's performance in this, nothing makes you feel more like Daisy as far as getting old sucks as watching Brad fucking Pitt get younger over 3 hours.
Yeah, that's very true.
And here's a fun game. When do you think a Brad Pitt getting younger, when does it stop being the real Brad Pitt and it's de-aged? Because I bet it's younger than we think.
Yeah, I think maybe it's not until the last time we see him when he comes back to see his daughter. That might be the last. They're like, that might be the first part where it's like, oh, they de-aged him.
It really is. It's just like, when does Brad Pitt start? Because I don't think it. I did see in as far as like prosthetics and stuff, they said they struggled with Cate Blanchett because she has the most youthful cheekbones. Yeah. And the makeup artist was saying like, I couldn't like age her cheekbones. So he had to find other places to age her. And Cate Blanchett is obviously a wonderful actress. We're not treading new ground saying that, but we said this about another movie, and I can't remember who the character was, but I find myself falling in love with Daisy because Cate Blanchett is so great. And even David Fincher in an interview said, he goes, if you look at Cate Blanchett long enough, you forget she's talking and you have to ask her to repeat it. And that's why I said the gazebo scene, like you're just sitting there in awe of this woman as you watch her. And, but no, the role, I want to stress the role is not entirely physical. She's absolutely wonderful. I loved watching behind the scenes with her and talking to David about, where is Daisy in this place? And Daisy is a fascinating character.
It's interesting to see that this, talking about like the script going through so many phases, David Fincher was kind of floating around with it, like in the early 90s, like before this was like right around when Alien 3 would have came out. So he hasn't even established himself as like the director of, Seven and Fight Club and these like dark psychological thrillers. So it's interesting to see him kind of go through this phase of his career of doing these things and then kind of coming back to this kind of heartfelt story. Yeah.
And at one point he was like on board to do this movie. And then they're like, okay, let's do a VFX test. And they did it and it looked great. But whichever studio it was came back and was like, this looks really expensive. And he goes, it is really expensive.
Yeah.
And he says, so I went off to do Zodiac, which is, again, a very horrifying movie. Yeah. Also, I love that man said, I went off to do Zodiac, like you and I would say, I went off and like had a cup of coffee. Like,
yeah. Like he puts out, that's another thing that's impressive. Zodiac came out in 2007 and this comes out in 2008. Both 3-hour insane movies that are so well done.
And like you said, Social Network was 2 years after this.
Yeah.
Just one hit after another.
Yeah. I think Zodiac might be my favorite Fincher movie. I always go back and forth between that and Social Network.
I know. And it'll be this tough. Next week. I know how you are.
Yeah.
Next week it'll be this movie. And so at least your wife is consistent. David Fincher.
She's stuck with it.
Fun fact, David Fincher and I share the same birthday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I like to think if we met, we'd either be really good friends or we'd hate each other because we'd be too similar.
I could see that either way.
So I think one thing we mentioned earlier is that this is not a love story. It's a death story. And I think as a result, because it has a very melancholy approach to life, I think it's about being alone. I think it's about we're all alone. Benjamin says at one point that he's as everyone was getting older, I was getting younger all alone. He talks about when he was very young / old, like earlier in the film, he's like, there was a lot of nights I had to sleep alone. He goes, I didn't mind. And there's a lot of him being alone. I noticed his father, Thomas Button, a very rich man, came from a wealthy family, a very successful family. I thought it was interesting that they go to his, after he dies, they're at his funeral. There's like 3 people. The funeral is packed with chairs and there's like 3 people there.
Yeah.
And even at the very beginning of the film, when Caroline starts reading his diary, he says that I'm going to go in this world the way I came out, alone and with very little. And I think that is a very dark theme. And this isn't the first movie to tread that idea, but it is that idea that we are alone. Odie says that at the beginning of the film too. Towards the beginning, he says, because they both consider themselves sort of outcasts, Odie and Benjamin at that point. And but he says tall people, skinny people, fat people. He goes, they're all alone. We're all just as lonely as the next person. And it's again, it's a very sad, and fast forward to the end, Daisy dies alone.
Yes.
Caroline leaves the room to check about, cause the hurricane hits and she dies alone.
Yeah.
And in fact, but even like his piano teacher died alone. We don't know about Queenie, but it's kind of like one of the only people that seems to die with anybody. There's a few of them. Captain Mike does. But Benjamin doesn't die alone.
Yeah.
So
That's very true. There's a, I think this movie kind of like maybe inspired, like, I feel like there's a lot of movies that maybe came out after this that were kind of like more like fantasy, like period piece films. One of which me and my wife rewatched that we both like, and she likes a lot. And she said this movie made her think of it. So we're like, oh, let's watch that. Is The Age of Adeline with Blake Lively, which is a story about a woman who is, born, I think in the early 1900s, and then is basically gets in a car crash and is struck by lightning, and kind of like her heart stops. And then at that point she kind of stops aging. And she kind of, it's a big theme of it is like being alone. Cause every 10 years she kind of resets her life just because people will catch on that this woman is just like not aging at all. So it's like a big theme of that movie is just, she's living life alone. She's living a lot of life. She's doing a lot of things, but never sharing it with anybody. And is it even worth living if she has to reset her life every 10 years, and never really connects with anybody other than, her daughter, who keeps aging past her. And it's kind of like her daughter becomes kind of the more wise one, telling her that she needs to kind of let this being finally connect with people. So I think if you haven't seen that one, that's a fun one to check out. That's kind of like a good companion piece to this one, I think. Okay.
I have not seen that. I might have to check that out.
It's good. I like it.
Is it as good as this?
No.
All right.
It is not.
It's the Chernobyl of anti-aging movies.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about hummingbirds.
Sure.
I also want to talk about them in relation to this movie. So hummingbirds are they don't show up a lot in this film, but we first get introduced to a hummingbird because I think it's one of Captain Mike's tattoos. But he's in the bar when they're in Russia. He's in the bar and he's talking about a hummingbird, and that if it stops moving, it will die. And he also said that, if you slow down the wings flapping, it makes a figure eight. So it's an infinite. And we see a few hummingbirds in the film. In fact, when they're on their tugboat, they get attacked by, I think it's a German U-boat. They get attacked, and ultimately the tugboat sinks and Captain Mike dies. And the tugboat's named Chelsea. And Benjamin, when they get rescued by the Navy, it looks like, he throws the life preserver into the water. I don't know what the significance of that is. I'm going to guess it's bad luck to probably keep a sunken ship's life preserver on deck. I'm just going to guess
it seems like
that.
Some kind of ritual thing that they might do.
But he throws it, and a hummingbird comes up from the water, not from the water, but around that spot. It kind of meets it, and then it flies up to Benjamin, and he says that he goes, "I've never seen a hummingbird that far out to sea before or since." Yeah. Also, at the very last scene, the storm is hitting, and Daisy looks out the window and sees a hummingbird, and she says, "Good night, Benjamin." And that's it. And she dies. Yeah. Now, I did look into this. One, hummingbirds are the only bird that can fly backwards. So sort of playing into that idea of life moving backwards. But also, hummingbirds are often symbols of love. And that South American cultures, some of them believe that they represent past loved ones. And so I think the idea is the one at sea, the hummingbird that flies away is probably Captain Mike. And the one at the end is probably Benjamin, and probably Benjamin coming to get her. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah. So is it, talking about like Daisy dying alone, like she does, but is she really not alone? Is it because she was there for Benjamin when he passed?
And he came to see her.
He came to see, because she talks about how, she could see it in his eyes that she, like right in his last moment, that as a baby, that he knew who she was, which is a heartbreaking moment. But yeah, then he came to see her and get her.
And I like, actually, one thing that keeps happening, and I'm curious what you think, because I don't know that I found anything specific about it. They keep doing this thing where Benjamin and Daisy say goodnight to each other. Good night, Benjamin. Good night, Daisy. And there's a moment early when they're both separate and they both say it. And they also say it when they're together. Mm-hmm. And the last time they see each other and they sleep together, she leaves the hotel room and they say it again. And then Daisy says it as she dies. And I just think it's interesting all the times they do it. I don't know if it's that kind of connection between them. I also didn't know if that was connected to the fact that Elizabeth Abbott says that her father was afraid of dying in his sleep. And so he took naps. And I didn't know if there was anything connecting that he wouldn't sleep because he was afraid he'd die in his sleep. And so I don't know if there's some connection between that and those two saying goodnight to each other. Yeah. And it's that they're thinking of each other. It's a finality. I don't know. Thoughts?
Maybe that it's like, they always say like, never go, if you're with somebody, never go to bed angry. So maybe it's just that, maybe it's this, that they're thinking, maybe I won't see you again. Mm-hmm. And just saying goodnight. I don't know. Cause I mean, and like we said, a lot of this movie is that people go not on the time you think they're going to go. They might, somebody might die and you thought you had more time with them. I think it's a big theme within this. So yeah, that's interesting to think about that. As if maybe they're thinking about it too and realizing maybe this is the last time I'll be conscious and see you. Mm-hmm.
And it's probably just something as simple. It's them thinking about each other. It's sort of just it's just two quick lines that connect them. Yeah. And it's loaded. It's always loaded. It's never just a good night. Yeah. Yeah. And, one thing I thought was interesting, and I didn't notice this. I've never noticed this before. First of all, do you remember, is there a moment in the movie where Benjamin gets a scar under his left eye? It's faint. Oh,
I don't know. Cause I noticed that when he's really young, right?
He's a baby.
When he's a baby. You saw, I noticed it in that moment where he comes back and is like, probably like a 16-year-old or 20-year-old. But yeah, I don't think I even noticed it at that stage. But yeah, I don't remember a moment where that actually happens.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to think. And I suppose it kind of gets hidden by all the wrinkles when he's old. So but I loved this sort of juxtaposition as she holds him as a baby, and you have a baby which represents kind of purity. But he has this scar under him, which our scars they represent a life we've lived and maybe mistakes we've made or choices we have, but a life lived. And I just, what an interesting visual, a baby with a scar, to kind of represent him at the end of his life as a baby. Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I had noticed that, in a couple of moments when he was younger, but I'll have to go back and see. But yeah, I don't remember a specific moment, and, I guess that could have happened at any time. And like you said, hidden under wrinkles, possibly. Yeah. Or maybe it is just like a figurative thing of just the things that he's gone through. Maybe not like necessarily supposed to be a physical thing, but like a representation of just the life that he has lived.
I think it's similar to maybe Llewyn Davis. This idea that even though in Llewyn Davis's case, it was him repeating the same cycle over and over again. But as we talked about, like he accidentally lets the cat out, but the next time he stops the cat from getting out, the idea with him was that, we may be doing the same thing over and over again, but hopefully we're learning something. We're a little older, we're a little wiser. And so I think that there's something similar between that and this idea of a baby with a scar on it, a baby that's lived a lot, just that, again, purity with a scar on it. I thought that was really interesting. It's something I never noticed before.
I didn't either. Yeah.
Applause, David Fincher. What else you got?
I mean, Brad Pitt on a motorcycle he looks good. I'm just going to say that. They make him look good when it's really Brad Pitt.
You're absolutely, and what's funny? What is that? Is that after he goes to Paris after Daisy breaks her leg.
Yeah.
So after that, yeah, and he said something about wanting to find something in his life or something like that. But yeah, he throws the thing off, and you're absolutely right. He throws the cover over that, and then they just have this glam shot of Brad Pitt riding down the road on a with like a scarf flailing and his hair going in the wind. And you kind of hate him.
Yeah.
You know what? You can age any direction you want. If you look like Brad Pitt, I think you're doing fine.
Exactly.
And that's why it's almost funny when she starts to hate him for looking. It's like, yeah, because like when she breaks her leg and he gets in there and she goes, "Oh my God, you're perfect." I'm like, we all thought that.
Yeah.
It's one thing to age backwards. It's another to be a dick about it.
I really like the, I think the short story has a lot, like it's really kind of just a sequence of events where he's literally doing things that somebody would do in their life backwards, not only aging backwards, but, he starts out getting married, and then he kind of has kids, and then he has a military career, and then he goes to college, and then he's doing all these things backwards. And I think that the movie doesn't the movie does that, I think, but we get to this sequence where he has kind of a really nice monologue, and he's like backpacking through India and Cambodia as if he just gotten out of high school. He's taken a year off before he goes to college. I think the movie has these really subtle things of moving backwards through time and living life backwards. But he's going there with so much knowledge already of the world that you don't normally see of somebody. Normally somebody's going to, go backpacking through wherever to find themselves or whatever. They're young and stupid and are trying to learn about the world, but he knows so much now that it's interesting to see somebody with that much experience go and do these things. It's like he's kind of lived his life and now he gets to do the fun things in life.
Yeah, and again, it's the short story is kind of is youth wasted on the young.
Yeah,
and certainly that sequence in the movie, as you talked about, it's the postcard he writes to his daughter, who we do find out, and it's funny. The movie really telegraphs that Caroline is his daughter, but I think that's deliberate. I think it kind of calls back to when Benjamin is describing Daisy breaking her leg. I think it's kind of this idea that life's coming at you and there's nothing you can do about it. So I think the reason, and there's a couple cases of this, I think the reason he doesn't make these big surprises or the fact that he kind of telegraphs them, we know they're coming, I think is to kind of show these sort of inevitabilities of life. Life is coming at you and there's nothing you can do about it. When he's telling us about Daisy breaking her leg, he says, if all these things changed, maybe it would have been different. But unfortunately, and she goes out into the street, and then we do this hard cut back to Benjamin's face, and he's sitting in a hospital. So we know something happened to her. Basically, the whole time he's recounting that, we know something happened to her. Also, when his affair is over with Elizabeth Abbott, he says something about them meeting every night. He goes, and then one night, and he goes into an empty room. We know already that she's gone, even before he goes and reads the note.
Yeah,
I think Fincher deliberately did that so because of these ideas that life is coming at you, you can't do anything about it. And so I like this idea of good or bad, things are going to come for you, and it's fate, which seems to be one of the themes of the movie.
It does.
But the Caroline, yeah, and she's reading this thing she's actually reading her dad's diary, and she didn't know who he was. But yeah, that it's never too late to start living, to be who you want to be. There's no time limit. Start whenever you want and make the best of it. And if you're not happy with it, start over. Yeah. And that's great. And I love that. Good. And I like how that's first illustrated. He sees on the news Elizabeth Abbott at the age of 68 swam the English Channel. Yeah. Which I thought was great. Which actually does bring us to an interesting question. And I don't know, why didn't Daisy tell Caroline about her dad, her real dad?
I don't know. And a part of me is also wondering, what did Benjamin have to leave? Did he really need to? I mean, I know it's he didn't want Daisy to have to take care of both of them, but maybe it would have been better if he did stay.
And she concedes that. However, I think he's gone for about 10 years. It looks like he's gone for about 10 years, but that he, she says, "You're right. I couldn't have raised both of you."
Yeah.
Yeah. And boy, that when he leaves, the interesting thing is he abandons his daughter the same way his dad abandoned him.
Yeah.
Granted, with a lot more money. He left her with a lot more money.
Yeah. And almost for like opposite reasons.
He loved her.
Interesting. Yeah. He loved her. And yeah.
His dad ditched him because he hated him.
Yeah.
Man, first of all, it's sad, but what a knife in the heart that he kind of sets all the money out for her and gets everything. And he looks down and he watches Daisy watch him leave.
I'm glad that I revisited this movie and giving it another chance, because I definitely didn't give it enough of a chance when it came out. And I remember liking it, but I think I was too young to fully grasp everything that it was saying. And I have a much more appreciation for it now. And
that's the point. It's Daisy in her 20s.
Yeah, exactly.
Just didn't care about anyone. This doesn't register with you. And yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you too. I don't remember the last time I watched this movie. I know I've seen it several times before, but just to get a chance to sit and watch it again and with fresh, I mean, certainly a movie worth revisiting every 5 to 10 years.
Totally. Yeah.
Because you're going to have a different perspective on it. And it's just, I think it's easy to say a movie about life and death is kind of a cliche of a theme, but I think when you have this interesting idea of a character, but I also think that's sort of why I think one of the major reasons that cinema has survived this long is because I think cinema has spent a lot of time trying to understand what it means to be human. I think there's many art forms to that, but certainly film has, I think, spent a long time trying to figure out what it means to be human. And certainly this movie takes a good stab at it. That a lot of things that we know, but we get to see in a different way. There's things in your life you can control and things you can't. I like Tizzy tells Benjamin that you never know what's coming for you, because he says that his grandfather worked for a famous actor in the 1800s, and that actor was John Wilkes Booth. And he's also got that piano teacher that says, we're meant to lose the people we love, and that's how we know how important they are, and life moving in a circle and all these things. So you can't watch this movie without getting just a little introspective. Breathtaking movie. So do you have anything else you want to say, Josh?
No, I'm just kind of in awe of David Fincher always. That's about it. For somebody who's so cynical as he is, to make me feel this much in a movie is impressive.
It's David Fincher's voice all over this, and really speaks to the power of I think a mistake Hollywood makes that we hear all the time is they think directors and writers are expendable, and they're not. They all have a voice, and there's, you have a David Fincher because there's a way he sees things and views things and perceives things that is different from everyone else.
Yeah.
So, absolutely wonderful film. So we were, I feel like this wasn't as funny as the last one because we had a good time, but God, I love this movie. I love being sad.
Me too.
Actually, on that note, I do know people that won't watch movies that make them sad, among other things. And I think if this movie teaches you everything, it is that life is meant, the entire spectrum of being alive is meant to be experienced. You don't appreciate loved ones unless they die. You don't appreciate the good unless you have the bad. And that's why I love watching movies that are sad, because then those ones that make you laugh, or make you happy are that much more powerful,
Yeah.
So, So that was The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Thank you everyone for listening. We greatly appreciate it. I'm having an absolute blast doing this. How about you, Josh?
I'm loving it. I getting to revisit movies that I haven't thought about in a while, or, seeing something new that have always wanted to watch, and then kind of having a deeper discussion on what we think about it. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, and I've never had an opportunity. I realized like I just spent the last 48 hours just up to my eyeballs in this movie and the story and the history and the making and everything. And it's wonderful to just like to put a film into your DNA for just a little bit. And I feel like we've gotten to do that with everyone. So this has been an absolute joy to do. And we appreciate everyone who's listening. I hope you will check out The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Next time we've decided we're going to do the movie Barbarian, which I have not seen, but Josh has.
I am excited for this.
He assured me it's a delightful romp. Speaking of comedies, I'm looking forward to that. And thanks everyone for listening. We greatly appreciate it. And we will catch everybody next time.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
My name is Benjamin Button, and I was born under unusual circumstances. While everybody else was aging, I was getting younger, all alone.
You're so young.
Only on the outside.